We're alive.
Welcome to today's financial meeting. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Ms. Crimer is absent. Mr. Michaels.
Here.
Anybody here for Ms. Crimer?
She did say that she was unable to make the meeting due to an unexpected work engagement.
Do we have a motion? I put forth a motion to
Motion to excuse Brittany.
excuse. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're gonna get more people on this committee. I approve the following agenda. Do you second that?
I do.
Okay. I approve the minutes from 9/9/24. Do you?
Let me just take a brief glance. I looked at it earlier today, but I just want to double check. Yep, it looks good to me. Motion to approve previous Finance Committee meeting minutes.
That was a second from you, I believe, Pete.
I put forth the motion.
Okay, then I'll second
Make it
that.
like very easy. The whole meeting, I will do the motion. He's gonna second.
Well, we'll see.
All right, next we have to discuss the financial packets
Do the minutes.
to be approved.
They did. Motion to approve from Mr. Fisher, second by Mr. Michelson,
All
and
in
all
favor?
voted in favor.
Aye.
Roll call.
I had Mr. Michelson on
Didn't know.
record as voting present.
Whoever has a blue pen.
Let me grab one.
I have a black pen.
I have 3 black pens on me.
Needs to be a blue.
On the grid right here.
Pen.
I got a blue and
Blue.
He's got one.
Yeah, I can see where this is from.
Interesting.
Our financial package reviews are gonna ask. So you have over here to go through the 24th and 25th, 2024 and 2025. Thank you.
On your agenda, it says 24, and that's for appropriations.
Correct.
If you're referring to. Do we want to do the financial packet first?
Yeah, financial packet first. Go for it.
Okay. The month of September, fiscal year 24, the village had a combined bank balance of $3,643,281.05. Of this amount, $238,816.34 can be found in the village's primary checking accounts, and $1,745,052.72 can be found in the village's high-interest savings account. The remaining balance resides in other village dedicated funds. The village generated $78,602.53 in general fund income tax receipts. RETA collections are approximately 26% higher than September of the previous year. For the year, the village has collected $838,916.29 in general fund income tax receipts. This reflects an approximate 7% trend increase over year-to-date fiscal year 23, which is certainly a positive thing a positive trend. Village received the second biannual disbursement of real estate taxes from Hamilton County Auditor and a homestead rollback from the state for a combined amount of $1,973,508.27. That's the full year. This is an approximate 7% increase over year-to-date fiscal year of 2023. As for receipts, the village received $183,770.35 in general fund receipts. This number is $118,802.53 less than September of fiscal year 23, mostly due to the August 2024 receipt of real estate taxes from the county. That was early, if you do recall, from the last finance committee. The Star Ohio Fund earned $7,091.27. The high interest Fifth Third Savings Account earned $6,780.70 in interest. The DEA Fund earned a whopping $32,042.58 for the month of September, bringing the annual total to $96,560.40. The top 5 pays for the month were payroll, Geiler, DPS, Rumpke Container, and Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund. The total village general fund appropriation spent for the month was in the amount of $233,452.32. This figure is $63,554.18 more than September of fiscal year 23 due to the HVAC upgrades with Geiler. The village had 6 outstanding payments that totaled $71,285.82. Village administration will continue to monitor appropriation spend and make any adjustments deemed necessary. Are there any questions?
Geiler's the roads, right?
Geiler is the HVAC system.
The HVAC system.
And that project
Our
is now,
HVAC is costing as much as roads.
No,
so, and that project is now complete.
Okay,
So,
great.
and it's actually, we had targeted completion of that project for next year.
Mhm.
So,
Great.
ahead of schedule. Any questions? Do we want to move on to appropriations?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have questions or do you want me to jump in on that?
Are we gonna do the 2024
Yeah,
amendment?
first we're going to do the appropriations amendment, if that's okay with you, Mr. Fisher. And then to do the 25 appropriations. I do have a copy of both of those in front of you. Just look at the top left corner. You should see one says 24, one says 25. It should be in order. So the village administration is requesting an increase in appropriations due to unexpected overtime during the summer. This is to compensate also for 2 resignations and the retirement payout for one of those resignations, namely Officer Mullen, in recognition of his 20-plus years with GMPD. This also includes an increase in personnel costs for the service department. Their summer activity did see an increase. In previous years, some of the part-timers were really less available. This year, they were more available and ended up using more of those hours. We're at a point now where we can finish the year, but we want to make sure that there is enough overtime in case of severe winter storms. The hope is not to actually use these appropriations, but to have them available that the service department can use them. That amount is only about $11,000 change. The total change, though, it's on the legislative memo, which I'm assuming you read anyway, but I will point it out. It is in, my apologies.
Yeah, it's a long memo.
The main thrust is in the memo at the top, not the actual legislation, but the main thrust is $44,000 in personnel and $9,000 in pension payments for the police. It's $11,227.96. Actually allows the police to spend the money that we received from the state for training. That was never appropriated because that was a new source of income. We were then informed that that actually cannot be commingled with other funds. Once that's separated into a separate fund, which council passed in the last meeting, now in order to spend that money, that has to be appropriated. So this would appropriate that. And then, as I said, it's an increased personnel cost. And I apologize, I said $9,000. It's $10,000 for the part-time service personnel as well as overtime for any full-time, and $2,000 in pension, which the village is obligated to pay anyway.
Where did you move that money from?
That would come from the reserve. I didn't move the money. It's just, I can only move money if there's existing money. This is an ask by the administration for additional money to cover those shortfalls.
So in total, that is how much?
In total, that is
42.
40, 30, 53, 63, 65, 70, $76,000. Again, the vast majority of that is to cover the overtime that we spoke about.
The police, so is it the same with the police department as with the service department, where there's currently funds available and just extra buffer just in case?
So with the police department, the issue is when a long-term employee retires, the way that it works is they are paid out a certain amount based on whatever PTO they have accrued.
Yeah.
We don't currently, and this is not something that necessarily should continue. It should be set up in a separate fund that any accrued PTO is put into a separate fund at the beginning of the year. We would have to create that fund,
Yeah.
something that we have to speak with the solicitor about. But in the meantime, it's generally not something we deal with because we don't have that many employees. And though we do have some long-term employees, it's not so often that they actually are retiring. So when they do, the village is hit with a significant amount. In this case, of the $76,000 that we're talking about, over $22,000 is the payout for that employee.
Mhm.
Again, it's a small number in comparison to our entire budget, but this combined with the extra overtime needed on, I believe it was Mayflower over the summer, as well as 2 resignations from the police department, which require in order to have adequate coverage, require more overtime to be spent. That's where this ask is coming from.
The money can't come internally from the police fund or any other places where the police does have money designated for?
So there are obviously, I mean, it has to come from somewhere. The money is available from the general fund because that's what pays for most of the police department. The police levy is technically for the usage of 2 officers. Right now, there are more funds in the police levy because of the EMA ARPA money that we received. I would not necessarily want to go there first, but that is another alternative source.
Why would you not want to go?
Because right now that money is making a certain amount of money in interest and does ensure that the police levy is enough for us in the long term, number one. Number two, in order to reduce costs elsewhere, where I was discussing with Mr. Fisher, it's actually technically a slight reduction in the total police operating budget, not the personnel budget. It's a slight decrease because there are more employees who are taking health insurance with the village. The police department is purchasing vehicles out of the police levy instead of the general fund. So that way, any cost increase which do come to the village are at least considered by the police department first. This is also hopefully to reduce the vehicle repair line item, which, I mean, there are so many things going on right now in terms of vehicles, in terms of maintenance and repairs that are getting past the point where it's affordable for us to keep them. We've discussed that previously. It's not gotten better since then. It's only gotten worse.
Mhm.
So this would also reduce some of the pressure on that line item, hopefully preserving some of that money by the end of 25. That's about $13,000 right now, and it's going. I mean, we're going to have to increase it. It's probably going to be closer to $20,000 by the end of the year. That's not to do with council. That's
Mhm.
using existing appropriations. It's just cutting from other programs that we can't afford.
Interest we're getting interest regardless, either which way, if it's in the reserve. we're getting
That's correct.
interest and-
That's correct.
So that's not gonna make that much of a difference. How much money is in the police fund? That's extra.
It's on your, if you look at 2903, it's the third page.
It's 700, yeah, this year's 749.
Correct, because we received so much in reimbursement from
So
the
why can't we
EMAR.
just take it from there? I understand we have to dig into the reserve.
It's possible we can take from there. Again, my goal is to try and keep the general fund as positive as possible. I can absolutely take it from there. I just thought, being that the police department is already taking on the additional cost of 2 vehicles, I wasn't gonna put every cost increase into that.
Again, we don't have to do it at this point. And another point, if the police department needs to dip into the reserve. As of now, if there's money coming in from our taxpayers for policing, we should use that for policing and not leave that to grow more interest and take from the general fund.
Understood,
That's my simple
understood.
understanding.
I can make that change. That's not a problem. And that would be.
Unless I'm missing something.
No, that is a legitimate possibility. That is not all that difficult to make that change. I mean, whatever. It's also just logistically, the way that we code it in UAN becomes more complicated when I have to pay a certain amount of employees out of totally different line items. It does make the accounting a little bit messy. This is the cleanest way to do it.
Well,
But
if we have
it
an
can be done.
emergency, if there's an emergency that has to be paid for by the village, you can't necessarily take funds out of the police fund to cover those.
Right, no, I
You can take
understand.
out of the general.
I understand.
Also now, I'm just jumping a little bit over here, okay? That's the street fund. So the police fund, you have 457 extra from the police levy. Yeah, my recommendation would be to dip into the police fund and leave the general fund for general, and if we ever have to in the future help out the police department, we'll always have there to help out. It's just when people are paying taxes for police, that should go for the police, and we should use that for what the police need now.
Right. Again, this was grant money that came from the state. This was not specifically levy money that came from our taxpayers directly.
Correct.
You're right.
Where'd that state money come from?
The federal government, probably from the state of whatever.
Where'd the federal
Probably-
government get their money from?
Probably not majority, whatever. Anyway, that's a conversation for another time. But yes, the point is taken.
There will still be close to 400,000 in reserve.
100%. It can be done. I can make that change. It makes the accounting slightly complicated, but I'm happy to make that change if that is your preference. Just make my job more difficult, that's all.
That's exactly what I was just gonna say.
You just make my job more
Exactly what I was
difficult.
just gonna say.
Okay, David, you want it, you got it.
I don't want it, I just don't think we should dip into the reserve when there is extra police money.
So again, and this is a conversation that we can continue when we look at the finance packets. We're already on point to exceed, on plan to exceed municipal income tax by at least $30,000 for the year. So the likelihood is that we will not end up dipping into the reserve, but certainly if we want to make a call like this to come out of the police, that's gonna reduce any dipping into the reserve and may actually grow the reserve.
So you had predicted when you were doing projections last month that the reserve was going to grow this year.
Correct.
Do you remember what that number was?
I don't off the top of my head. I mean, if you're looking at what I proposed, it was close to $150,000.
Right.
But that's, again, we assumed that we were only, I'm sorry, I looked at the wrong column. We assumed we were only going to collect $925,000 in municipal income tax. We're on, if it's a 7% increase, which is where we're about at right now, so 925 times 1.07 I mean, it's gonna be way higher than that. There's almost no chance that we only collect 925. And we still haven't seen the money from the county yet, which that's also a ton of money that is gonna come into the general fund. So really, once you consider the grant funds from the county, then we're looking at least $150,000 to $200,000 growing in the general fund reserve.
All right, that's good news.
I hope so.
All right, so I would approve to allow the $76,000 to add on to the police department, and I would like it to come from Fund 2403, is that what it's called? 2903.
2903. Yeah, I can make that adjustment.
You second that.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Eric, would you like to start discussing appropriations for next year?
Yes, just hold on 1 second. This is where taking minutes and giving a report is much harder, that's for sure. Okay, I'll take that later. Fine, so for the 2025 appropriations. Appropriations include the previously discussed 6% raise for the police department, a full pension pickup for village employees, and increased overtime. The increased overtime, again, is really a rollover from the conversation we just had, and this is because the current village rate for overtime for certain specific details is higher than standard overtime. That has been discussed in previous council meetings, specifically because a lot of these are last-minute call-ins of people who are otherwise on their off days and have to be paid at that higher rate for the youth enforcement detail. We had at times, I believe, maybe Captain Reed can clarify, I believe it was 2 extra officers on at any of these times.
Yes, at the peak of the summer when the issues were far exceeding what our normal manpower operations could handle, we would have 2 officers designated to combat the issues that were plaguing the residents. And that was a nightly need. I mean, we could go on and on, but I think we all know the issues that we faced this summer. They were not like anything we've ever seen before. We'll just put it at that to stay politically correct. But we met it, we overcame it, but yet it took a lot of off-duty manpower to leave.
Okay, so in the next year's budget, we are adding that in at the beginning.
That would be added in at the beginning, correct?
Not knowing if we're gonna have a teenage issue, but assuming we're gonna.
So, but again, the advantage of something like this is that if it does get out of hand, the money's there. If it doesn't, so then the money's not there. Now, the council does not have, in this case, committee, doesn't have to approve this. This is a preemptive measure to ensure that there is enough overtime available in case these kinds of events repeat. Now, being that this was the second summer, I felt that that was appropriate to increase. I wouldn't increase it over 1. The other thing which we've noticed is over the last couple of years that staffing turnover has also caused a strain on current staffing levels, which required increased overtime. We had Chris Russ resign last year, which caused a significant amount of overtime. We had Cameron Ammerman resign earlier this year, which caused additional overtime. My recollection was the month of September was significantly more challenging. We have, like I said, we have a planned resignation, which I know the police department is working to fill that position, but things being the way they are, police officers are hard to come by. So this is in anticipation for some of that, but mostly due to the summer activities to have that increase in overtime. The discussion for a 6% raise and full pension pickup that is really part of the larger conversation which we've had in previous committee meetings, which is just to make the village more competitive, so that we're not in the lower 25% of Hamilton County agencies.
I know when we had talked previously about the pension pickups and the salary increases to make us more competitive and help with retention and recruitment of officers. I know I kind of talked about the idea of, instead of doing all of the increase at once, doing it like 6% a year, which it looks like this would be.
Correct.
At least for this year. Has there been discussions about locking that 6% in for the next like 3 years to meet that amount that the police had initially requested? Only because if we, I'm just kind of feeling out what's out there, because if we do this, which I'm all for, I want the police to be able to get the best people they can. Who knows who's going to be on council next year or the year after. And if it's a retention thing, I know we were looking at a little bit of like a longevity solution instead of a kind of one and done
So
Band-Aid fix.
my understanding, and this is really probably more a question for legal, is that would have to be a contract signed with individual employees. The village only does appropriations for the current year and for the following fiscal year.
Yeah.
So we can't pass appropriations for 2027 if we're not there yet. Council can express the sentiment that the intention is to increase police salaries by 6% a year over 3 years. But more than that, any binding nature of that statement, I believe, would have to come in the form of an employee contract.
Actually, it would be done by ordinance. Since we are a non-union shop, we would not do a contract with employees individually.
So the village could pass an ordinance that guarantees a 6% raise for 3 years for the police department?
Correct.
Okay, so that would be,
help us a lot as far as recruiting. A lot of agencies, when they announce that they're hiring, they'll say what their current rate is, and then they'll also include in their advertisement what their future rates are going to be based on contracts. If we had something in writing, I think that would strengthen our position in recruiting.
6% year over year or 6% locked for 3 years?
So it would be 6% locked for 3 years.
Yeah.
The issue we have, and I want to get off topic, but I want to circle back just to what the chair stated earlier. The overtime issue is not just a teenage issue. We got hit for 2 years with vehicle thefts. And it wasn't just a Golf Manor specific issue. It was a Kia defect on Kia vehicles that allowed the vehicles to be stolen with a iPhone charger. We got hit with that at the same time we got hit with the juvenile issue. So we've got personnel here combating the juvenile issue, and we've got people here ensuring that they're not called away to prevent the theft of motor vehicles from occurring. And just to give you some foresight, we'll have to release something later in the blog about this. There is a new tactic on the rise of, it's called remote detection deterrence, where the signal can be stolen from your key fob to another key fob, then I can take your vehicle like I'm the owner of the vehicle. So that's something we're gonna have to contend with and deal with now. So to give you future insight to that's probably gonna be our next issue, but we can talk about that later. As for the personnel, the raises go, we have a retirement that is planned, and we have no one in the pipeline. It is an extremely competitive market right now. It's an extremely tight market. So our overtime, as Reno stated, is going to go up because we don't even have a person to remotely look at because we are not competitive. If you look at Hamilton County overall, we're probably in the bottom 25% right now. So when our postings go out for jobs, people don't even entertain it. And that's not to say that this isn't a great agency, that we don't have great leadership, that we don't offer the best training. People are only looking at one thing right now, and that's the one thing that we can't give them. And I'm not saying that we ever want to get to a point where we price ourselves out of business, but we have to be competitive, as you stated, to get the best candidate. And we've been able to do that so far, but our IOUs and our borrowing and bartering and begging pretty much are running out. We have to put up or shut up. The plan of being able to say 6% this year, 6% next year, it helps Because what we do now is when we hire an employee, we have no idea what they're gonna make next year. But the other job postings that are out there, they say what the employee is gonna make in 25, what the employee is gonna make in 26, what they're gonna make in 27. Now, that's not to say that that's the end all be all, that's gonna fix all the problems, but at least it puts all the chips on the table for people to see, if I'm gonna work here, this is what I'm gonna make in 25, this is what I'm gonna make in 26, and I think that helps us tremendously.
And also the initial ask of 15.32 was not inclusive of the annual 3% that always comes anyway. So it'd have been on top of
So in 3 years, it's gonna be 18%.
5 instead of 21 or something like that.
It's like 21 and a half. What it would've been.
Would this be coming up in today's council meeting?
Potentially, it doesn't have to pass tonight. It's up for, this is really council's first look at appropriations for 25. The biggest items on appropriations for 25 are these increases,
When do we typically pass?
November.
November?
So it needs to be passed by the council meeting in November, which I think is the 25th.
David, would you be comfortable moving this to council and giving us some time, giving us the month to work, figure out all the minutia and all the details and look into it just so we can keep things moving, or
Yeah,
what are you thinking?
I'm actually okay with this 6%.
I did provide to help you see more precisely what the ask is. I showed this to David earlier, is the actual, what do the pension increases look like? What does the 6% look like? What does the overtime look like? That's on your council packet.
Yeah.
And the big changes there is how many hours are budgeted for overtime, how many hours are budgeted, what's the actual change by the 6%, and then of course the pension pickup, meaning if you would just do the pension pickup, it's still a $35,000 increase for the village. Just doing the overtime increase is $32,000 because you have to pay pensions on all of that. Just doing a 6% is $25,000. So all of them together, because one is a percentage of the other, it doesn't add up to 97 individually, but total, it adds up to 97. Now that's in addition to what we would normally budget for as a standard 3% increase. Significantly, the fact that most of our income comes from income taxes and we are seeing an increase in that, we know that salaries are going up, right? We know that businesses are expanding, but we also know salaries are going up. So that is consistent with a 6% raise. That salaries are just going up across the board in every industry.
So would this be 6% on top of the 3, or I thought it was just the 6?
No. It's 6%. I'm just calculating the difference between a 6% raise
Got it.
and a 3% raise.
Yeah.
I apologize if that wasn't clear.
Nope, you got it.
So there is an asterisk to this conversation, and that is what happens next Tuesday during the election. We have a 7 mil levy on the ballot. So if for some reason that levy would not pass, that means this whole conversation needs to be changed.
Look at it again, yeah.
So it probably does not make sense to pass appropriations this evening because we
We
don't
need to see what
know.
happens anyway.
Because essentially, if the 7 mil levy doesn't pass, that's $280,000 out of our budget for next year. And we'll have to figure out how to either expense our way out of that or look at various modifications to staffing or look at what we would use out of the reserve.
Yeah.
There's also an option of running that levy again in the spring. So, and I think the mayor and I had that conversation last Wednesday. So that's something that we don't know. I'm hopeful. Our levies have always passed 3-1, so we'll see.
What would you like to do, David?
Well, I think we should move this along as is, that council should take a look at it. Obviously, anything could change, but now we have to pass it next month. But, leasing is a good idea to invest in, and if our levy doesn't pass, then we'll have to, figure it out then.
I'm also not sure of the timing on it, but if we were to want to lock in that 6% over the next few years, working out with Mr. Butler on what that ordinance would look like. I mean, I don't think we need to ask for that now, but over the next month while we, look into this further and discuss it amongst ourselves, we just want to be ready to ask him to get that prepared if necessary.
Point taken.
That would be a resolution?
It'd be an ordinance.
Okay,
It would be in the pay ordinance.
okay.
When we talk about this, we talk about that also. Yeah. All right.
Let me get that in a minute, sorry. Right in the, okay. In terms of
This
after the
20
I apologize. After the 3 years, would we want to include a standard 3% increase?
I think
or-
that's currently in the ordinances that.
I don't-
It's included, it's not necessarily in the pay ordinance, but the pay ordinance states that appropriations dictates what salaries are.
I would just think we would revert to the current state.
So it should just be for 3 years and then revert? Okay.
Well, because, I mean, that's all we've talked about up to this point. We haven't,
Right.
And all, like Mr. Hertz said, that could all change next week. And we'll start needing to do some backflips and figure out what's going on.
The 2025 appropriations does not include that 76 that we spoke about earlier, correct?
Say it again?
No, because that would be for the current years.
Correct. 2025 does not include that, and I didn't update it because that's not changed.
In the 2025,
Right, in the
would you
20.
now have to add into here another 76, or that?
No. That would go in the 24 column. That would only go.
You're
in
not gonna be
24.
changing the.
Absolutely not.
Okay, I put forth a motion to show this off to council. Do you second that?
Second.
All right, next. All right, salt, man.
Okay.
Ready for the salt?
So I reported for the past several council meetings that we have been working on a solution to deal with drainage issues that we've had in the back of the building. Part of that is water backing up into the old fire department building. Part of that is being in compliance with the EPA with our salt bins, which we were not in compliance. One of the major accomplishments that have happened this year is the maintenance department has installed a cover over the salt bin to help with runoff of water and to better protect our salt product. The other piece of it, though, is dealing with the drainage on the backside of that building. So during the Weehee Road project, part of that project included adding an additional sanitation, not although the sanitation, stormwater hookup to the Weehee Road, which came across the street into our parking lot. The next step of that now is to do the reconstruction of the drainage system in the back of the building and then to hook up to that drainage, which will then put us in compliance with the county and with the EPA. We had put this out for bid through our general, through the road engineer. We were expecting it to come in at $260,000. We actually, the lowest bid we got was for approximately $170,000. The engineer has recommended that the vendor who provided that bid is a trustworthy, it's a good bid essentially. And that is before council this evening to go ahead and approve that contract. Mr. Pridnock, do you want to talk a little bit about where the funding for that comes from?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a creative use of the road levy. The road levy is definitely a big necessity, as I don't know how many of us were here back in the mid 20-teens when the roads in Gulf Manor were not very good. But the current road levy supports the efforts that the village employs, and essentially would be the source of that funding for the municipal parking lot. Now, this would be to make improvements which directly support and improve salt distribution for winter weather. So the salt bin is all the way in the back. So where the parking lot is being used for vehicles to make deliveries, that parking lot would be updated, as well as the parking lot where the drainage issue exists. The drainage issue, I think Mr. Hurd mentioned, is to the point where when it floods, it actually carries salt with it, which is a problem. But in terms of funding, this would come out of the road levy.
So essentially, we're budgeted for it.
Correct.
Sounds good to me.
So we would be looking just for a recommendation to council to pass that legislation this evening.
I'll move to recommend it to council.
Second. Jim, how's our salt doing? Our salt is doing well.
We're full.
We're full. We're ready.
We're ready. Very salty. Very salty.
And it might be good to note for this committee where the salt's coming from this year.
The county did not do a bid for salt. They kind of left everybody on their own. But they made the offer they would sell us salt. Since the same price, we just have to go pay it up. And it turns out we're helping them because the county engineers have way too much salt and the EPA is on them because they can't contain the runoff.
Mm-hmm.
So we got our first, we went up last Thursday and got the first shipment of it. So we estimate there's about 35 tons in the back.
Great. How long does that typically last?
It all depends. We probably didn't go through 50 tons last year, but the year before we went through a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on what kind of winter. We're using more because we have the brine mixer now.
Yeah.
We're making our own brine, so that takes surprisingly a lot of salt to make.
I think it works better, so.
Yeah.
Not solid though.
It was a good investment buying that equipment.
So, and I would encourage you, if you have a chance, go back and take a look at the cover on the bin. It's pretty cool.
I'll take a look tonight.
So.
If you need some salt for your sandwich. All right, next. Lee Elbrook intersection.
So I want to thank Mr. Putoff for representing me at the last council meeting to discuss that project. So we're at a decision point with sort of funding to either accept or deny the funds that we were awarded to do that intersection project.
Mm-hmm.
We have been advised by our contractor who maintains the current signals that there's about a $30,000 investment that needs to be made to rehab those signals, which really doesn't make a lot of sense to put money into that old equipment.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems we have is the height of the poles in that intersection. They're too low to accommodate modern signals. So we're kind of stuck unless we make a change in those intersections with using old technology. So I understand that the executive committee approved moving forward or accepted the design or whatever it was that was discussed at the last meeting. So as a result, I've given the engineer the okay to go ahead and bid that project. We have set aside, I think it's $260,000 in the road fund to cover our expenses, but the rest of that funding will come from SORTA and a grant that we've been awarded. So this is, basically, there's nothing you need to move on this for this evening. I just wanted to make you aware that this is coming. There should be a bid for the intersection project sometime during the month of November. I don't have a date yet, but.
Yeah, I'm glad it's moving forward. I think it's important. I know we have a lot of people using that intersection in the current, like walk lights and everything don't work. And with the working system, more people are more likely to actually use it.
Yeah, and this will change all of that. Plus it will do the bump outs on the on the crosswalks to make them safer and shorter, to hopefully keep people from ever being hit again.
Yeah.
Finally, on the funding, if you want to go ahead and do the next one, Mayflower. So the next street that is targeted for renovation is Mayflower. Mayflower, if you drive down it, is in pretty bad shape because of all the utility construction that's taken place. That street is also a candidate for getting new curbs to the box curbs that we've been installing on all of the streets that we've done. So there is an opportunity for us to get grant funding from the Ohio Public Works Commission. That process is actually in process. And essentially, there's nothing that we would expend at this point, but I do need council to weigh in and give it okay to go ahead and apply for those funds. Whether we get them or not, I don't know. Depends on where our project ranks with all the other projects that are being requested. But generally, OPWC will pay for 50% of the project, and then will give us a 20-year loan on the other 50%, which is how we funded most of our street projects that we have right now. This is in our, excuse me, it is budgeted. It's in the projections for the budget for the street levy for the next, for this current funding round. So what I would ask for council this evening is a recommendation to the full council to pass applying for the funding for the Mayflower Street project.
All right, on both of these discussions, we do give our blessing to the council to go ahead and discuss this. You second that?
Second.
All right, before we adjourn, I would like to go into executive sessions and matter of personnel and compensation.
Second. Are we inviting anyone?
I'd like to invite the mayor. And then we'll have a roll call. It is a roll call. And we would like to invite the mayor.
Is Zafiro doing his thing this evening? Did he call you?
He is not. I will
So you don't need to be here.
He'll do that executive and then attend the next full council if there's any questions.
Okay.
Presuming he gets pushed on.
So what are we doing executive session?
Fisher, yes.
Mr. Fisher, yes. Mr. Michelson.
Yes, I guess so.
These concerns, it's going over how much that attorney costs, so you should recuse yourself during this.
Okay. So I'm also recused from this. So we need to end the stream.